Good afternoon to everyone at today's public hearing of the Vetting Commission established under Law 65 on the external evaluation of judges and candidates for the position of judge of the Supreme Court of Justice. My name is Andrei Bivol, chair of Panel A of the Commission, and I declare the session open. This hearing is being conducted under Law 252 from 2023 on the external evaluation of judges and prosecutors and amendments of some regulatory acts and under the Commission's rules of organization and functioning as part of the evaluation process. The subject of today's hearing is Angela Bostan, a judge at the Central Court of Appeal. Madam Bostan, welcome. I'm joined by two other members of the panel. On my right, we have Madam Lavly Perling, international member of the Commission, and on the right, Lilian, Enciu, national member. We are assisted also by members of the Secretariat. Behind you may see some representatives of the media and the public. We also have a photographer today with us who will take some photos briefly at the beginning of the hearing. The hearing will be conducted with interpretation between Romanian and English. To allow for accurate interpretation, I ask everyone to speak clearly and slowly. Moreover, the recordings of the public hearings are being recorded. This will be generally available online at the Commission's website within 3 days after the hearing. If the hearing is partially closed, this closed part of the hearing will not be made available on the Commission website, but the rest will be recorded and included in evaluation file materials. During the hearing, one or more members of the panel may ask you questions. We kindly ask you to answer them truthfully and completely, because your explanations are important to the panel in verifying your financial and ethical integrity. At the end of the hearing, you will be given the possibility to make a brief closing statement. In posing questions, we will consider your privacy and, where required and possible, the privacy of your family members and close persons. So, we will leave out in posing questions unnecessary details relating to, let's say, ID numbers, specific addresses, or bank account numbers, cadastral numbers, and so on. We ask you to do the same in order to protect your privacy. The evaluation procedure of Madam Bostan was carried out the following way. As of the 11th of April 2024, we notified by email Madam Bostan by asking her to complete and return an ethics questionnaire and the declarations required under Law 252. Madam Bostan returned the completed declarations and the questionnaire on the 30th of April 2024. As part of the ethical and financial integrity of the subject, the Commission also obtains information from many other sources, such as National Integrity Authority, State Tax Service, General Inspector of the Border Police, other public institutions, financial institutions, and any other open sources. The Commission assesses the information it obtains for its relevance and reliability. During 25th of September 2024, 30th of December 2024, Madam Bostan was sent 3 rounds of questions. For each of these rounds of questions, the subject requested to extend the term to answer for different reasons. All the applications were accepted by the Commission. As of 15th of January 2025, Madam Bostan presented the answers to the last round of questions. As of 30th of January 2025, the Commission informed Madam Angela Bostan about the areas of doubt identified in relation to the financial and ethical integrity which are to be discussed. We also invited her to participate at this hearing. Yesterday morning, 10th of February 2025, Madam Bostan presented explanations and additional documents. Madam Bostan, would you like to correct or add something to your answer that you previously provided to the Commission? Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation, and last but not least, for your understanding for some aspects of a situation which led me to request the extension of the deadline. Thank you very much for accepting this. And I want also to mention that due to some circumstances, I had no possibility to collect and present some documents, but I mobilized, and together with my family, I obtained them and I presented them maybe late, but I tried to cover those questions and the subjects raised in the areas of doubt. I actually stand by all my statements, all my answers, all the information I provided. I today have also a series of documents relating to the activity of my child's father, and I will kindly ask you to attach to the file because I obtained them yesterday, if it is necessary and you accept this. Okay, we will accept. I just would like you to describe what kind of documents, because we've received yesterday some copies uh, of the receipts and some information from a non-banking loan organization about some loans taken by your child's father. So what you want to present today are different documents? Yes. It's a series of contracts I found in some specific conditions at home, and this prove of an activity during 2012-2013. Prove the activity of this person during this period. Contracts signed between the law firm of this person and between different legal and natural persons. And to clarify, those contracts are related to the receipts you presented yesterday or are an additional. These prove that that person had an activity during 2012-2013 period. These contracts also reflect the receiving of some payments for the legal assistance that he provided.
Madam, I would like to clarify.
Just a moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Madam Bostan, I would like to clarify how and under what conditions did you find the documents yesterday? Just it's important to understand us.
So, in the office where the lawyer worked, at the moment when the office was made free, they removed from there will remain a few boxes with documents. I did a lot of effort today, these days, to select and look through all the information and documents in that box. The boxes were kept at my place because the office belongs to me. There's a lot of documents from which I extracted some relevant ones, and I couldn't decide to present them now only. I asked that person to present the information, and he said that everything remained in the office. He had nothing else. So, myself being the one who collected all the documents from the office, I did all my best to select, to look for them in that mass of documents, which were a lot. Madam Bostan, last question before going directly to the questions of the Commission. Did you calculate what is the full amount of incomes reflected in that contract? So for 2012, about 30 or 40,000 lei. For 2013, 28, 30 and something thousand lei. Thank you very much. You can present those documents, you can refer to them, and after the hearing you can submit this to the Secretariat to be included in the file and later on to be evaluated by the Commission. Could you please confirm whether the answers that you provided in the exit questionnaire and declaration submitted as of 30th of April 2024 are still valid as of today? Yes, with one single clarification. When the questions in the questionnaire related to the expenses for the holidays, the amounts are indicated as holiday expenses reflected the expenses for the accommodation and transportation. But regarding the shopping we had during that period, during those trips, which mostly related not to the holidays, but we had also travels for work or private visits of relatives or close persons, and therefore those expenditure would include some shopping items that we bought during those travels. So some holiday expenditure were not reflected by me as holiday expenses, basically, because we bought items related to for the household, clothes for my child. Those were things that we bought and brought here into the country to use them. It was not related to the holiday trip. So these are things that relate to this misbalance, this difference, and I wanted to clarify this. Thank you very much. We will clarify about this difference, the amount that were declared and the other amount, and later on we can come back to this topic. Now the members of the Commission will ask you questions about the areas of doubts that were included in the hearing notice. We will try to be concise and to the topic, and we ask you to act the same, to answer the same. In the hearing notice, you are informed about several areas of doubt which mostly relate to ethical issues and financial integrity issues. Let's start with the apartment on Lev Tolstoy Street. In August 2018, your mother bought an apartment in the center of Chișinău on Lev Tolstoy Street and a storage space in the same building. For total, your mother used approximately 1 million lei for that procurement. That was given the fact that for that period, the average prices in that period in center would be around 1,144,000 lei for such a property of such a surface. The question would be whether or not you have an explanation for that difference in the market price and the price that was paid. Okay, yes. So from the explanations my brother gave and the discussion with the person that sold that property, at the moment when this property was bought, it was being repaired. That one was restoring another property, and the condition to buy this property was that he would be able to use for another 6 months that place in order to be able to finalize with the repair works in his other place property. As far as I know, the works were finalized at the end of 2019, so the seller kept using since August till the end of the year, even beginning of the next year, that property. Maybe that was the reason for reducing a bit the price. Even though I believe that the maximum value of a property that maybe is repaired in such conditions in the same area was the one that the Commission invoked, especially referring to the negotiations. I was not the one to negotiate. The agreement was between the seller and my brother. Can you tell us the apartment was ready to use? When the contract was signed, after the contract, we went to see the apartment. We cannot say it was in a bad state, but we could not say, especially when it was when the previous owners left, that it was ready to live freely. There were some problems with the sanitation, with the toilet, with the bathroom. There were some issues with the window on the balcony, which was of poor quality. it was not very bad, destroyed, not terrible, but not perfectly arranged too.
Puteți, vă rog, să precizați cine a contribuit la achiziția apartamentului?
Could you specify who contributed to the procurement of the apartment and what was each one's contribution in this transaction? Honorable Commission, as a priority, I'd like to start from the fact that buying that apartment at that moment was conditioned by some situations in our family, was due to some situation in which our mother was. Therefore, my mother had this intention to buy the property. As far as I knew, she had this idea previously, but now that at that moment that strong need was due to her poor health condition. And if we did not react, meaning that mobilize to provide support to our mother and my brother to come with the financial support, and we would have left her in the bad conditions in the countryside, things could have gotten worse. So that's why we had this final decision coming from my brother when he accepted to contribute with this amount to buy the flat. The amount coming from him was 30,000 euro, because my mother had an amount of money, had some savings, because as we already said, she had this idea to buy a property before that moment, together with her sister. Initially, they were thinking to have a property in Hâncești to be close to me. After that, I transferred to Chișinău, and having again the intention to be close to each other, to be more united, in order to be able to help our mother. Buying an apartment to Hâncești was useless now, so we decided to move our attention to Chișinău. The amount that my mother and sister had was enough. We were discussing about the fact that I would get a loan and maybe to join our efforts in order to buy a property. But this was not done before 2017. And in 2017, when my mother fell by accident, the conditions already became very specific for the loan, and I did not risk such a responsibility. So, as far as I know, my mother's contribution, together with her sisters, was about 20,000 euro, and the brother contributed to the procurement of the apartment with 30,000 euro. So after that, he came back in the country in 2019 and contributed other amounts in order to bring that place to the conditions that we have today. And the intention to get a mortgage loan did materialize somehow? Did you think about other possibilities, or it just remained at discussion level? So at the moment when I tried to find that possibilities, I had the idea to get a loan using the Prima Casa First House program, but when we decided finally, this went beyond the limits of this program, and I could not achieve this objective. I had some other discussion, but allow me to stop you here. You mean the restrictions, the limitation, you mean the maximum of value, maximum amount? Yes. So I had discussions with my son's father, who always used to say that the property in Hâncești will be donated. He will donate or sell that property in Hâncești in order to support our son from the amount he would receive following the potential transaction. But at that stage, he was very reluctant in accepting the sale to start the procedure of to start the sale of the property, because he was saying it was not a proper time. The sales market was not good. The properties did not have the appropriate value, and the money that he would get following that procedure would not be enough for him to get another place to stay, and he would stay homeless. So let's understand. Approximately 30,000 euro was the contribution of your brother, and 20,000 euro was the contribution of your mother, and 10,000 out of that 20,000 was received from her sister abroad. First of all, I want to say that I did not part in the counting those amounts, but from the discussions I had with my mother, the idea would be this one. Maybe the amounts that my mother and her sister contributed are also estimated, because my mother has a specific age and she would not keep an account of those. But she knew that she had that 20,000 euro that she intended together with her sister to use to buy a property.
I would like to say that my mother's sister has a Cahul that she's not living in Cahul, and they were not excluding the idea to sell that apartment also for this purchase. Again, the accident that my mother had sped up these things. The situation on the real estate market was not good. Her sister was in Russia, so it was difficult. So we had to mobilize within the family. I understand. And this apartment that your aunt has in Cahul was sold? No, it wasn't sold up to now, because in 2020, when she wanted to come back, there were these restrictions related to the pandemic. Then there was the situation in Russia. Currently, if my mother's sister would come to Moldova, she wouldn't be able to receive her pension, because it is paid in a banking system that is not acknowledged in Moldova. She would really want to do this, and we are trying to find ways for her to come back, and we're trying to solve inclusively this situation related to the apartment. So she wants to settle back in her home country, because she's in a faraway region from Russia, and her health condition doesn't really allow her to live there. She has a pension of approximately $1,000, which she cannot transfer, and she would not be able to benefit from it in the Republic of Moldova, given the restrictions imposed to that country. Besides the documents that you presented on the salary of your aunt for 2018, did you offer any other documents showing her incomes and even this pension of $1,000 that you mentioned? There wasn't the question of presenting this, but if necessary, I could ask my aunt. We are interested in the period before the transaction, so that we could understand from what sources could your aunt make savings that she would later send your mother in order to buy this apartment. So besides 2018, when your aunt allegedly, or based on the documents, her whole salary was 6,500 euros. So we don't have any other information. I understand your question. Now I will refer to other circumstances established by the Commission. So the Commission determined that my aunt used to send regularly some amounts to my mother. These are approximately 7,000, or maybe a bit less or a bit more than 7,000. So she had the possibility to transfer these amounts of money. So this shows that she had an income that is proportional. And based on my aunt's words, she's working and she is receiving a pension also. I don't know whether she has an official employment contract, but I know that she has all other sources of income besides the pension.
Ca să înțelegem corect, toate
Let us be
mijloacele
clear.
băniești
All
transmise
these funds
către mătușa
sent
dumneavoastră
by your aunt
transformate în economie.
were transformed into savings by your mother. I can certainly say that my mother confirmed this. Moreover, my mother had 2 hectares of agricultural land in Cărpinen village, which were given to my father as a person who was rehabilitated after the Soviet persecutions. Well, my mother is using this land, it is renting it, and she is receiving agricultural products that she uses for poultry. So she can provide all the food from her household. So she even has some benefits from it. Does her health condition allow her to continue these activities? So since 2017 and in 2020, maybe even 2021, my mother was limited in doing so. However, given the fact that we put in all the efforts, currently my mother at least can run all these processes. My brother ensures that these lands are given to other person that is working the land, and another person that is also paid by my brother is helping with the household. And currently, in terms of mobility and all the faculties of my mother are essentially improved. I'm not saying that she's doing all these activities, but at least she's managing them. Given the activity of, or the different activities that your mother had before the purchase of the apartment, so between 2013 and 2016, I understand that your final answer is that she did not need permanent financial support from her sister. This means that the funds transferred by your aunt were saved, all of them. Is this your answer? I want to make a clarification. Maybe this is related to something that might help the Commission understand the situation. My mother was the oldest sister in a family of 3 children. So when my mother was 18, their parents died. Her sister was 7 and her brother was 11. And the mother was the one who raised them, educated them, and she used to study and work in parallel and took care of them. My mother's brother and sister didn't have a family or children. The only relative of my aunt is my mother and we. They have a very tight connection. And the idea of purchasing this apartment and a joint place where they would live together came in when my mother's brother died, and he died all of a sudden, and nobody knew about this death for more than a week, and they were one in Cahul and one in the Russian Federation. They were away, and this had a big impact on my mother and her sister, so they decided to join efforts so that they could live together and support each other. So this idea appeared in 2006, 2007, so that the idea was for my aunt to live with my mother when she would come back, because my mother lived with my brother and it was difficult for all of them to live together. Now they have an agreement. Well, my mother has an agreement with my brother in terms of how to manage the assets of my mother. I can disclose this if necessary.
Un împrumut.
Let's stop here.
În perioada
There was a loan between November 2018 and November 2019. Your mother paid back a loan taken by your brother in October 2018.
Acesta a contractat un credit
When he
cu
took
1950
this credit
euro
of
de la United
2,950 euros from United Capital LLC. So the banking records show that your mother
la ghișeul MAIB
deposited cash in MAIB to pay monthly installments between 6,500 and 7,200 lei. The total amount paid back by your mother was 80,000 lei. This is the information offered by the financial institutions to the Commission. Could you explain? Because we want to clarify by this loan. Did your mother go physically to MAIB to pay this installments? First of all, this was not a loan. This was the purchase of a tractor in leasing. Because my brother wanted to come back to the Republic of Moldova and to start a business in agriculture, as they had these 2 hectares in Cârpineni village. In 2018, in the fall, if I remember correctly, when this contract was signed, my brother was in the country. It was 2018 or 2019. So he personally went and signed this contract. And it was already known that the investment of the sums that he had went to the apartment. So he didn't have enough money available to cover, or didn't take the risk to cover this in one payment. And later, after my brother left, and when I was accompanying my mother, there were 1 or 2 occasions when I went personally to the MAIB branch in Cârpineni, and my mother withdrew some amounts that my brother sent and paid for these installments. And afterwards, these funds were sent by my brother, inclusively through packages, and the person who was bringing these funds was bringing them to my mother personally. So you didn't make any payments for your mother? No, certainly no. I understand. Are you currently living in that apartment? Yes, I am. With the agreement of my brother, I've been living there, and I still am, and I have the agreement to register there because we were thinking about potential later management of the goods from Cârpineni and for this apartment. If the Commission wants, I could detail on this. Since you said that you declared the right of habitation for 2021-2023, I would like to ask whether you lived permanently in that apartment in that period. No, I didn't. And only now, in 2024, 2025, I started being there more often because, first of all, the property from Hâncești that belongs to my son is used by his father who came back. We have a more special relationship. In 2023 and 2024, he was abroad for work. At that point, I was in Hâncești more often. Currently, my son intends to sell this property from Hâncești together with his father.
n-ați locuit permanent.
So you didn't live permanently in that property. Did your mother live in that apartment? Of course. In which period? Basically, between 2019 and 2020, she lived in that apartment. In 2021, she used to live there for the winter period, because during the summer she was mostly in the rural area. And currently, my brother is in the Republic of Moldova. Therefore, he lived, where my mother lived together with him for a period in Hâncești, and currently my mother is here now. Not for a long time. You concluded an agreement with Telecom for telecom services, and you are mentioned there as the owner. I'm not the owner, I am the user of the services. Indeed, I need internet because I need to work. Therefore, I took responsibility for this contract and I am paying for this. Did you buy a parking lot in... no, I'm renting it. How much are you paying? 10,000 a year. Are you still using it? Yes, I am. Let's discuss about the contribution of your brother, for which you presented several supporting documents, inclusively yesterday. Yes, I would like to mention that for this, my brother went to Italy. He submitted a request at that bank, and the bank supplied this information only for the past 10 years, mentioning that the regulation of the bank provides for this limitation. I sent to the Commission the link to this regulation of the bank, so that you understand why it wasn't possible to get information for the previous period. The Commission analyzed these documents, and I would like us to discuss a bit about whether you know, besides the incomes, what were the living expenses of your brother, monthly expenses or any other expenses while he lived in Italy. From what he told me, in 2012 he got a divorce, and after that his incomes... I'm sorry, I would like to make a clarification. Is this a divorce that is formal? Probably yes. I mean, it's documented. We will discuss about this later. So he continued working in the same company. He was a driver, and he was thinking that it would be good for him to come back in Moldova to start a business in agriculture. So he had a modest lifestyle. Actually, I didn't know a lot of details about this lifestyle, but I analyzed these bank statements for my brother, and I noticed that he had limited living expenses. They were modest, and the largest share of his expenses until 2016 were related to the payment of the lease agreement, because he was living there with someone, from what I understand, and this rent was paid jointly by him and the person he was living with. And the rest of the expenses were the minimum necessary to live a modest life. For a period, I won't say which years, because I don't know this, he didn't rent a place, and he lived where his office was, but in most of the time he was away for work.
Ați menționat adineauri că o perioadă a plătit
You mentioned that for a period he paid
în
rent
extrasul bancar care l-ați
based
prezentat
on the
de
bank
perioada
statements that you offered for 2015-2018. We can see that
dumnealui realiza transferuri
he used to make transfers
de
each month
430 de euro
of 430 euros
terți neidentificați pentru că
to
nu
third
putem
parties
să
that are not identified
nu
because
sunt identificați în
we
extrasul
cannot
respectiv.
see this. They are not
Dar este o
mentioned in
plată
the excerpt, but this is a recurring
Asta să
payment.
fie chiria.
Could this have been the rent? Yes, I asked. I also noticed this payment. I asked, and he said that this was a payment for renting a place that he was renting together with his colleague. And sometimes he would pay the full amount, and the colleague would return his share in cash. And when the other person paid, my brother would return his share. But the contract was in my brother's name.
Deci, noi am calculat și
I
asta ar fi
understand.
cam
We
24%
made some
din
calculations, and this would be
venitul
approximately
din
24% of his
mergea la chirie.
monthly incomes for rent. And other 20-30% of the incomes went for the living expenses. And the other expenses, well, the other amounts were withdrawn in cash. And from what my brother explained, this cash was used to save and transfer amounts to my mother. And in some cases, to help his daughter, because he also has a daughter who is studying and working in Italy. Therefore, he has a very good relationship with his daughter, and as much as he could, he gave her this material support. I made some estimate calculations with these cash withdrawals throughout these years, and they show that from his monthly income, at least half was withdrawn in cash, and I asked how he used to use it. And I have this information that I'm not now making available to the Commission.
Am înțeles.
Understood. Oh, please keep going. Chairman, I want to mention that my brother is a very honest, humble person in terms of spending. And I want to say that myself, also going back to those packages that were sent to the brother, to my mom, and they would also he would give also my mother a lot different things that would be needed for the household. I want to mention that the relationship between my brother and my mother are very close, and myself as a sister also. We do not doubt the Commission these relationships. I just want to clarify one more aspect.
Aveam 24%.
So we have 24% that was going for the rent. Commission also identified the retail expenses, which obviously are expenses, about 25,000 euro, which make up other 9%. So we have 50% of the income. The other 50%, or this all used, or from those 50%?
Acest 50% mai erau și alte cheltuieli. Ați menționat
Other expenditures were made because you said about the minor daughter that had to be provided for. No, she was not a dependent basically because his daughter is already an adult. She was born in 98, so in 2018 she turned 20. In 2016 she turned 18. She was not a minor, but my brother did help her. I did not ask how much, but I know that he did support her. Not provide for her, but to help her financially. What was that support? How much? I do not know, but I suppose at least 200 euro per month he could have provided. Maybe 1 or 200 per month. Some other details. Where the daughter of your brother lived. The same community, the same settlement my brother lived together with her mother in Italy. Yes. From the statement you provided for 2019, for the 6 months of 2019, relating to a credit account of your brother. From that statement, we can see that in 2018 he had used about 1/3 from the loans that were taken for the retail procurement. Most of those happened in 1 or 2 months. The statement shows significant daily expenditure. I want to understand what you're saying when you say modest costs, expenditures, because you said that your brother did not incur some expenditure, but we can see from that bank statement that the expenditure were even more than 50% from his income. So what do you mean by modest expenses? In 2019, those expenses, those amounts that were withdrawn to be used for specific goods, assets that my brother bought from Italy and took from Italy and sent to my mother for her flat. As far as I remember, he sent some appliances. Moreover, those amounts were withdrawn to be used for construction materials used for the repair works in that apartment. The amounts were withdrawn in Moldova, which shows once again that by taking that loan, he knew about his intention to come back home in the country. He had this idea. He knew about the need to endow the apartment with some specific things for our mother and to repair the apartment. Moreover, it was not clear whether he would be back or not after that from Italy. As far as I remember, he also bought some equipment. I've seen at home in the countryside different annexes, tools for the tractor, for something else, boxes from that tools. I could not call them in Romanian, but I've seen those boxes. His intention was to prepare to have the necessary tools if he decided to stay in Moldova. And he bought those tools because he had those and has those skills in agriculture. Going back to what you said, what you stated before. Let's say about this voluntary alimony or maintenance allowance, that's much financial support that your brother offered to his daughter. Do you know whether it was sent in cash? Of course, yes. I can clarify these things if I call my niece and asking some clarifications from her side. We've looked into the bank statement you sent and we want to understand if that amount was used from the cash that was withdrawn from the account. I suppose, yes, probably. Because if they live in the same locality, they meet quite often, and during those meetings, he might have given her the money.
Yes. Thank you.
Please.
Madam Bostan, I would like to ask from you 3 very simple questions. The first, just please tell who has used this Lev Tolstoy apartment since it was acquired. Please just name. It's not necessary name all the all full names, but who? You, your mother, who else?
That apartment was used by my mother, my brother, and myself.
Thank you. 3 persons. Who used this apartment the most?
Eu și mama.
Myself and my mother.
And the third question, who do you think is the biggest beneficiary of this apartment? And both in terms of use and ownership.
My brother and my mother.
And what about you? How you feel? What about your benefit?
Well, I don't have a benefit from that apartment. I have the right of use, which occurred as a result of the need to stay with my mother, having the idea to provide her support. Because basically, starting from 2017 until 2020, my mother had serious mobility conditions, problems, sorry. And during the pandemic, I could not leave her without support and care. This was a big source of emotions, anxiety, and moral investment from my side. So I had this obligation to help my mother. And believe me, if there was not this need to be with her, I would have solved my situation. I would not have resorted to using this place, this apartment.
But do you confirm that legally right to use the apartment is benefit?
The right to use is a right deriving from the fact that I had the acceptance from my mother to use free of charge that property. But in our conditions or circumstances, this was mostly an obligation from my side, which I fulfilled.
Thank you.
Haideți să să mergem la următoarea chestiune.
Let's move now to the next issue related to the year 2015 when you purchased a Honda CR-V car.
Produs în 2009.
Year of manufacture 2009. You bought that car for 175,000 lei. You explained that this was a relatively good price by the desire of the seller to leave the country and by the fact that there was a lot of offers of similar cars. So you registered the right to the ownership for that vehicle as of 3rd of February 2015. But before that date, you withdrew only 3,450 lei. You had savings of 55,000 lei and received 98,000 lei from my bank as a loan. You also had the expenditure in cash before that time of almost 2,700 lei. So from that calculation, we have the situation that at the right of when you registered the property, you kind of did not have the 21,000 lei to pay for the car. So your explanation: how did you cover this price, the difference when you purchased the car? I did not understand the question, but indeed, the procurement of that car was a sudden idea, was not planned. I did not have the intention or idea to buy a car. I did not have the idea to save money for that car. When I was transferred to the Court of Appeal from Kumrat, I understood I needed a car to travel to that place, to that community, where basically we did not have any other way to travel, to move. We didn't have a direct public transportation route. So, as you've seen and as you've mentioned, I mobilized my efforts to take this bank loan. I used all the financial possibilities I had at that moment in order to buy that car. I don't have a very exact information about how the money was collected at that time. Most of them was covered by the loan that I took. At that moment, I might have resorted to a short-term loan. Maybe I had one and I paid it back in 2 or 3 months, let's say. But I do not want to insist on that because I do not remember. During a few months, the amount might have been repaid because we had also situations when I asked my child's father to step in the case of an emergency. I cannot for sure tell exactly how I covered that amount at that moment.
Haideți să discutăm despre următoarea situație.
Now, let's discuss about the next procurement. In 2010, you bought a Lexus NX200T, a year of manufacture 2014, for 250,000 lei. You explained that this relatively low price by the fact that the vehicle had been in a serious accident, but repaired by the former owner. And there also needed some repair works from your side. The car was bought as of the 2nd September 2020, and the 12th of September you paid 21,500 lei for some repair works. You also incurred expenses in cash of about 38,000 lei, and only approximately 187,000 lei were available to make expenses in cash of approximately 309,000 lei. According to our calculations, you did not have available a difference of 122,000 lei. So can you explain this difference? This difference was later on covered by the sale of the Honda vehicle. So, in order to buy, the idea to buy this new vehicle was based on the fact that the previous vehicle was creating some troubles, which myself as a woman could not solve. So I decided to change the vehicle. I asked for advice from some acquaintances that had some experience in this field, and that's how I obtained the contacts of Bezborodko, this person, and as a result, I acquired that car at the price you mentioned. Initially, when I negotiated the price of the car, I've seen how it looked like, what was the condition. Indeed, it had been repaired after the import. It had been imported with more serious defects. Afterward, it remained with some things that were not repaired, and it had some visible defects on the left part of the car, on the left side. And when I called Mr. Bezborodko, I expressed my intention to buy the car only after selling the vehicle, my vehicle Honda. He told me that his godfather was having some activity in the sale of cars, and he could provide some support to me in that sense. So I resorted to the support of Mr. Rudko, telling him that I wanted to buy the Lexus, and I asked him to help me to sell the Honda vehicle. He accepted, and he announced for sale the vehicle. Those discussions happened in August 2020. During the negotiations, Mr. Bezborodko contacted me when we already had an agreement that I would sell the Honda car, the Lexus would be repaired, and I would buy it. He called me and he told me that the situation appeared which needed him to go to Ireland, if I'm not mistaken, where he had a permit to stay. It was at the end of the pandemic, and he said he was called to go back to work. For those reasons, we agreed with him that we did not know when he would come back, and the idea was to conclude the sale purchase contract for the Lexus car before he would go, and this was done in September. Meanwhile, the Honda vehicle was in the process of selling. This being the responsibility of Mr. Ridko. This process took some more weeks after Mr. Bezborodko went to Ireland. So for the sale of the Honda car, I gave the rest of the amount to Mr. Rudko, the godfather of the previous owner. How did they do this? How did they transmit the money? I don't know. Maybe they had some agreements, but for sure the full price was paid after this Honda car was sold. And the buyer of my car, Honda, who wanted to pay in installments, I insisted to cover that price. And when he gave me the money for the car, the Honda vehicle, Mr. Rudko was present, and I insisted that he would give the money to Mr. Rudko. We understood, but to make sure that we understand it correctly. The car was bought, and the right of property was on you, on ownership, and you registered this 6 weeks before. And this process was determined by the sale of your former car. That was the responsibility of Mr. Rudko, the godfather of the seller of Lexus car. Yes, moreover, when I accepted to buy that car, Mr. Bezborodko did not have the intention to leave. He had no need to leave. It was during the pandemic, and he settled at that time in Moldova for a non-determined period of time. I did not know about him needing to leave. Maybe if I knew he was to go, I would have negotiated in a way that he would leave a warrant and mandate to sell his vehicle Lexus, leave that mandate warrant to his godfather. But this happened suddenly.
Moreover, this situation was fully confirmed by those persons. So I discussed with them, I explained the situation, and they confirmed this without any issues because this is exactly how things went. Let's discuss about something more abstract about the expenditures and the retail expenses in your bank accounts. In the third round of questions, you were against the Commission, including the CEP, but also the retail expenses identified in your bank account. The Commission applied protection measures to respond to your concerns about the double accounting of the expenses by separating these expenditures in your bank account based on the categories for the population expenditures, and put in your outflows only those expenditures that went beyond the categories of CP. This went to adding to your bank account some expenditures that went beyond the CPE, and part of them were considered by the Commission as having been paid in cash. The Commission made this assumption because you declared several times during the rounds of questions that you used cash to pay for your daily expenses. Do you have any objections on the methodology that the Commission used for CP? I don't want to find these criteria just for 2021 and 2016. I would insist that for 2021, under the expenditures that were added for me, 56,000 lei, which are the amounts in my son's account, and I would like to discuss about this in a closed session if possible, and to discuss about 2016 when there was that negative balance. And I still believe that if the Commission had taken into consideration the financial support that my son benefited from his father, wouldn't have had this negative balance. In terms of expenditures from my account, I would like to discuss in a closed session to give more details related to the purposes of these expenditures. These are related to my personal life and to some aspects that I would not like to give more details on in public. Basically, I agree with the calculations of the Commission, but I would like to mention that for certain segments that I mentioned, some of the criteria for CEP could have been covered from the money available to me. Thank you. Then let's discuss about the maintenance allowance paid by the father of your child.
Okay.
I still would like to clarify some aspects when we talk about the cars. And please, you can answer very shortly. Who finally organized the sale of the Honda?
Domnul Rudko.
Mr. Rudko.
Why him?
Because he had a business related to cars, and asked him to do this because I couldn't take care of this. Because I'm working and people would call me, I didn't have time to describe this car and negotiate.
You just now said that you asked from him to organize the sale of a Honda, yes? So it wasn't so spontaneous, or?
Nu, am înțeles întrebarea.
I didn't get the question.
You confirm that you asked from Mr. to sell your Honda. Is it correct?
Da, și acest automobil...
Yes, and this car was left at this company where he had this office, and he was in charge of selling the car.
I'm sorry, maybe I lost through the translation, but still, could you say where the money came from to buy the Lexus when the Honda wasn't sold?
When I concluded the sale purchase agreement for the Lexus, for this I paid 100,000 lei. The rest of 150,000 lei was given after the Honda was sold to Mr. Rudko, and he gave it to Mr. Bezborodko, with whom he had the family relationship. And the first installment of 100,000 was given to Mr. Bezborodko when we concluded the agreement.
Thank you.
Totuși vreau să menționez
Still, I would like to mention that this agreement is a standardized one and didn't have any regulations related to showing when the money was given. Maybe this is why this was not reflected that this was paid in installments. But this was confirmed by both persons. So let's go back to this maintenance allowance from the father of the child. According to your assets and personal interests declaration and the answers given to the Commission, between 2014 and 2020, you received 283,000 lei from the father of your child as a maintenance allowance.
Toate acestea, în aceeași
However, in the same period, this person had an income
fiscalizat
that was official taxed of 247,000 lei, which is lower than the average expenditures incurred by an adult according to the calculations of the National Bureau of Statistics. Therefore,
persoana respectivă nu și-ar fi
this shows that the person wouldn't have allowed, based on their fiscal, well, official incomes, to offer this support that you mentioned. How do you explain this difference? I would like to mention that since 2013, not 2014, so after I stopped living with the father of my child, I showed the amounts that he used to contribute to the maintenance of our child. So he declared to the tax services some incomes that I did not know of. I could not know of this, and it was not my obligation to check on this. I put in some efforts and I gathered some data on the activity of my child's father throughout this period, and I showed to the Commission that indeed he had an activity as based on his license as an attorney at law, and he had incomes that he got. I don't know how he reflected this in his tax statements. Moreover, could I have forbidden my son to receive these amounts of money from his father? This was not the question. Or let me put it in a different way. If a bailiff enforces a decision on the receival of the maintenance allowance, is the person obliged to check the source of this? I had no obligation to do this, and I didn't have the possibility. I saw that he was going to work. I met him in court. I saw that he was working because he carried out his activity in an office that was in the same building as I was. Moreover, the documents that I managed to bring in today confirm this situation. And I understand the question in a different way. If I hadn't shown these amounts in my income declarations, I would have had a different problem. And for that, I would have been responsible. You own an office space that you rent out. Yes, I rent out. You rent out. This was purchased before the evaluation period, and we'd like to understand the difference in price. So you rented it out to the father of your child, correct? Yes, he had the right to use it. There were 2 or 3 situations, or maybe even one, when he paid rent for this. We had an understanding that I mentioned in my answers. I understand
până în
And
2020.
what is the
În
explanation why
2020,
before
22
2020,
nu l-ați dat
no,
închiriere.
2022, you didn't rent it out to someone else? In 2020, when I intended to rent it out, there was the pandemic, because in 2019, 2020, I was thinking seriously about selling it or renting it in order to buy a property. At the end of this period, I had some very advantageous offers for renting it out, because it is in a good area. And this made me think that it would be better to rent it out in order to gather some funds that I could use for buying a property. And now I'm thinking, where I'm doing this, I'm saving some money to purchase a property. Moreover, in 2020, as you can see from my declaration, I obtained the habitation right for my mother's dwelling, and the fact that, well, I was no longer using the property in Hâncești, and Mr. Istrati no longer worked as a lawyer and no longer used this place. I understand that this use of your space by
Aproape gratuit.
him, almost free of charge, was conditioned by you using the apartment. Yes, partially yes. In 2021, he sold the place that belonged to my son, so we didn't have this mutual relationship.
Haideți să discutăm un pic despre veniturile fiului
Let's discuss a bit about the incomes of your son. Between 2012 and 2020, you declared your son as a dependent. You confirmed to the commission that you were the main caretaker for your son.
Și eram efectiv la întreținerea dumneavoastră.
So he was in your care. The commission identified that in the bank account of your son, there were transfers that could not be identified or cash deposits throughout this period of evaluation. In 2021, this amounted to 54,000 lei. Given the fact that you were the main caregiver for your son, and we didn't identify financial means that would cover for these amounts in the bank accounts of his father, the commission put them in your outflows. In the previous rounds, you informed the commission that your son was offering mentorship and tutoring for students, and he earned some money from this activity. Do you understand correctly that these financial means were not declared by your son to the tax authorities? No. Although I drew his attention on this, I had this reply that this is the result of his intellectual abilities, and he doesn't consider that these amounts should be taxed. I draw his attention on this, but he is the one responsible for this situation. Okay, then let's discuss about the differences between the expenditures that you declared in relationship to the travels and the one that the Commission identified. In the third round of questions, the Commission detailed 48 cases where the transactions from your accounts show different amounts than the travel expenses that you mentioned in the declarations to the Commission. The total Commission expenses identified by the Commission were of 168,000 lei, and the ones you declared were 42,000 lei.
Acestea includ
This include
o serie de călătorii
a series of
discrepanțe de genul
travels, and there
o
are
călătorie la Iași
differences.
care
For example,
este
a
de 4.800 lei,
trip to
costuri
Iași where you
blindate bancare,
declared
costuri de
4,800 lei, and the expenditures are 28,000. To Iași? No, Vilnius? No, we'll get to Vilnius.
83.000 de lei
83,000 lei.
cheltuieli declarate
Expenditures
identificate
identified
în România,
in
în situația în care
Romania,
s-a declarat
and you
11.500
declared
de lei.
11,500 lei.
Excursie la Paris,
And
care
a trip to
n-ați
Paris
declarat.
that you didn't declare.
14.000 de lei cheltuiți
14,000 lei spent in Venice,
în situația în care n-ați
and
declarat
you declared 3,000 lei as expenditures. 37,500 for a trip to Lithuania and Poland, and you declared to the Commission 15,000 lei as expenditures.
Cum explicați aceste
How do you
discrepanțe?
explain these differences?
Încep de la faptul cum am spus la început.
I will start with what I mentioned at the beginning of the hearing. When I declared travel or holiday expenditures, I only included the accommodation and the travel.
Tranzacțiile care le-am făcut
The transactions or the purchases that I made from my bank accounts reflect some purchases that I used to do during these trips.
sau nu am înțeles, poate
Maybe I didn't understand clearly enough that these should have been included as holiday expenses.
erau aduse și utilizate.
These goods were brought by me and used later after I came back to the country. And this is why I did not declare them as expenditures, because these were good purchases. Maybe sometimes there were hotels that were rented, but I couldn't have a very thorough tracking of them. Recently, I tried to use this banking app or something like this in my phone, but it only reflects the situation for 6 months. I didn't know that I had to do this. This was done from my bank accounts, from my cards, and they show services and purchases that I made during these trips. I went to Paris for work. I was sent by the Institute of Justice, and the accommodation and travel expenses were fully covered by the National Institute of Justice. And there is also a decision of the SCJ. No, sorry, SCM. Moreover, I would like to clarify something. Based on the information from the border guards, well, this information is only for 5 years. I didn't keep a detailed track on this. I changed my passport and I didn't have all these travels detailed. But because I was from the Bar Association, I was trainer at the National Institute of Justice, and often these trips were made for work. And not least, I would like to mention that I used to go, and even now I'm going often to visit close persons in Romania. These are relatives, friends, and for these visits I only have transportation expenditures and things that I buy there.
Adică aceste cheltuieli
Understood. But the expenses, you admit you had them? Yes, of course.
Comisia a depistat un deficit
The Commission identified a deficit, negative balance between your incomes and expenditures of 58,000 lei in 2016. How you explain this deficit? By the fact that it was not taken into consideration the maintenance allowance, the alimony for my son, from which he benefited and which are reflected in the my income declaration, and the fact that not all the expenses from the card account, which were paid by card, were included in the CEP. The Commission said that regarding the MAIB account, those cannot be identified because that account reflects only
la beneficiari
transactions to non-identified beneficiaries. But if the Commission looks into those transactions, as I did, I cannot identify all the elements of all the destinations of that money. We will identify expenses of 300-400 lei that were seen in 2016. Also, those were paid to fuel my vehicle, my car. Other expenses amounting to 2 to 300 lei from my IBA account were also used to buy groceries, food products included in the CP. And the fact that the bank does not identify those expenses is not my fault. Cannot be. You cannot blame me for that. I also insisted with the bank. I tried to clarify this, but they explained that till a specific period, they did not have this possibility to indicate a specific destination of the payments, and they cannot change the situation. In 2021, Commission identified the deficit of 42,000 lei between incomes and expenditure. How to explain this situation for 2021, this misbalance? Because I understand that in 2021 there was no child support or maintenance allowance already. No, the Commission assigned the movements, the financial movements that they believe cannot be identified, for which they believe the people that deposited those money cannot be identified. So those were put in the outflow, and this would indicate those high expenses. I want to draw your attention to a situation. How could I explain the 400-500 lei that I deposited allegedly by this B2B account to my son when I could give him that money without like by P2P, when I could give them money just in person? This means that you not necessarily gave the money to him, but this is on your account because these are of people that were that you are providing for dependents, objectives. So the declaration that we received yesterday coming from your son is meant to clarify the money that he received in 2021. Yes, yes, and we also there's also a list of people having benefited from his services, and he says that the payments. He said that the payments were made in cash. Afterwards, he would deposit them on his account. I want to say that that's how this generation is managing their business, is running their business, basically.
Și ce scuze, am omis, anul 2018, Comisia de
In 2018, the Commission identified a deficit of 751,000 lei. How do you explain this deficit, this misbalance? I totally rejected now this, and I stand by my explanations and the evidence provided, which show that I had nothing to do with the purchase of that property, and the big part that is invoked to me as a contribution is not real at all. And also in 2018, in my inflows was not included the maintenance allowance for my son.
Haideți să discutăm la ultima chestiune ce ține de
Let's discuss a different question about you participating as a judge in a case that ended with the decision from the ECHR. We talk about produce alia against Moldova. In that case, we had merged the four similar claims where the claimants obtained similar decisions where the authorities were obliged to assign them places to live based on the legislation. Following the non-enforcement of the judgment, the claimants went to court in order to be compensated from the state. Based on Law 87, when the violations were found out and some compensation of damages were decided. It was a decision of the case Kotovic, one of the four applications, and the claimant was given 3,000 lei for the non-pecuniary damages and 38,000 lei as pecuniary damages for the non-enforcement of that judgment decision. Relating to that judgment, the ECHR found out that the amount of the non-pecuniary damage was not enough, was not sufficient. And the first question is, if at the moment of the when that case was examined, which decision is from 2018, so at that moment, were you aware about the solution and the pilot judgment or decision for the case Olari Alia? Of course I did. And I also was aware of two other decisions in the same case which went through the Supreme Court of Justice, by which the claimants were given or decided to be given some funds as non-pecuniary damages in the amount assigned by the decision that was issued with my participation. Honorable Commission, in that sense, I do not waive or go away from some responsibilities of mine, or not responsibilities, but I mostly say that about the not being aware about the practices ECHR. I first of all referred to Article 18 from the Criminal Code of Criminal Procedure and some articles in the Constitution which in principle establish the obligation to take into consideration the facts established by a final court judgment, which are mandatory for everyone. In that regard, at the moment when the decision was issued in 2018, there were two decisions maintained till the Supreme Court of Justice, by which the claimants were assigned the same amount. We were not the ones who could ignore those decisions, even though the recommendation from the SCJ was referring to some amounts. Given the fact that even the Supreme Court of Justice, by standing by the previous decision, they pronounced this amount in their decision. Okay, let me stop you here a little bit. Those two decisions of the Supreme Court of Justice that you stood by, that you abided by, are those invoked in your decision in the Kotovic case? I cannot tell you for sure right now, but those were taken into consideration for sure at that moment. We are obliged to cite in our reasoning to invoke the practice of the European Court. We did know about those, yes. Did know at that moment that there were some amounts already enshrined in the practice of the ECHR, and there was also some elements of cooperation from the SCJ and the governmental agent, which talked about the damages that had to be paid in the amount of 600 euro for 12 months of delay and about 300 euro for each the month following. Did you take this into consideration at that moment? I want to mention that those recommendations are not compulsory. And about the final judgments, those are mandatory. are binding. But that recommendation was talking about higher amounts, yes, but the SCJ themselves, by standing by those two decisions and admitting that there were the decisions that we issued provided higher amounts, they finally stopped on those amounts that we invoked.
Sumarizez în modul următor.
So I'd like to sum this up. The fact that the Supreme Court of Justice did not respect their own recommendations encouraged you as a judge from the Court of Appeal to not take this recommendation into account. No. The fact that the Supreme Court of Justice, by their final judgments, created this mandatory practice in relation to such cases was not our fault, but this practice was compulsory for us given the recommendations, the provisions from Article 12 and 120. Okay, and you as a judge from the Court of Appeal, measuring the recommendation, which is just a recommendation, and the judgments of the Supreme Court of Justice for similar cases, you decided, or you understood that the judgments are more valuable as an element of reference for you as a lower court. I want to mention that in that practice, in those judgments, was part the claimant, the defendant. This was the position that was not taken by the court, but invoked by the defendant, the Ministry of Justice, who would bring these decisions and tell us that those were mandatory for us.
Deciziile Curții Europene
But the ECHR decisions who mentioned other amounts, when those were not mandatory, I want to bring some explanations in that sense to these ECHR judgments. In my opinion, ECHR, but those decisions raises another question, more serious than the amount of compensation. They raise the problem of non-enforcement of those decisions and the need to remove those practices when the state is not enforcing a court decision. I believe that the ECHR European Court is raising awareness of the state in terms of the need to enforce in an objective way. But the object of the enforcement is to ensure a living space during the activity of people in specific with specific entities.
Instanțele naționale.
So the idea, if the national courts were more responsive to these practices, maybe things change. But we had the idea that even if we were wrong, if we applied specific standards, this would lead us to some new practices. But this did not happen.
Vă mulțumesc. Doamna jucător Bostan, Comisia
Madam Judge Bostan, the Commission used all the questions addressed to you. Would you like to come with a final statement? Yes, of course. First of all,
Manifest respect
I would like to express my respect to the Commission for the conditions and the procedure this evaluation is being held. I want to mention that I became had acted as a judge in specific social circumstances, in specific conditions in which the judicial system was, and also Moldova in general. It was a situation when the judicial system tried to reach the performances of a rule of law, to achieve performances in terms of our activity as judges. So, referring to specific doubts, areas of doubts raised by the Commission might lead to situations when specific conditions of activity or specific obligations were not known to me that this would occur during my activity. So I actually rely and I am confident that all these aspects will be taken into account. By playing the idea that some criteria of this evaluation process became already relevant in the recent in the last 2-3 years. I maybe it was not always an example in terms of my discipline, financial discipline, meaning to keep records of all my expenditure, to keep evidence of all my expenditure and costs. But you should believe me that in the last 2 years I've changed my approach when I understood the realities and procedures that are now relevant. So I rely and believe that this will be a fair and objective evaluation, deviating from some formalities. And I want to thank you especially for the moments when the Commission was responsive and understood the circumstances I invoked. We want to thank you too. And Madam Bostan, Madam Perling drew my attention. Maybe I omitted something. But during the hearing, you mentioned about some specific circumstances that you would like to inform the Commission about in a closed session. Do you still want to inform us about those details? Are those relevant still? Just maybe to elaborate more on some specific things that I talked about related to the doubts. This would relate to some expenses that were higher than in other years, especially 2020, 2021. Okay, Commission accepts your request for a closed session with the appropriate excuses that those came after your final statement. Next, we want to have a closed session. We would like kindly ask everyone in the room leaving the room except the interpreters and the videographers.
So then we will reopen the session and close it. Madam Judge Bostan, thank you very much for taking part in today's hearing, for the responses and the information that you offered throughout the evaluation process. After the hearing, the panel will approve a report with the conclusions on your compliance with the financial and ethical criteria in line with Law 252, the panel will strive to complete and approve the evaluation report as soon as possible. Thank you, and now I declare this session closed. I would like to thank you also, and I'm optimistic.